君はね、確かにあの時私のそばにいた。いつだっていつだっていつだっていつだっていつだっていつだっていつだっていつだっていつだっていつだっていつだっていつだっていつだっていつだっていつだっていつだっていつだっていつだっていつだっていつだって
At the tone, the time will be midnight.
At the tone, the time will be midnight.
Oh. Hey there. Sorry, don't mind me. Well, I consider myself a bit of a Persona 3 fan, a Persona fan in general. You can tell by the music CDs, even Persona 3 dancing. Yes. And this game, Persona 3 Fez. I meant to have the 4 movies here as well, but I only just found them recently, and they haven't come in the mail yet, and I'm sick of waiting. But hey, what we are going to be talking about today is Persona 3 Fez. Why this one in particular? Well, because we're really going to be talking about Persona 3, The Answer. This addition to the updated Persona 3, Persona 3 FES, was released in April of 2007, almost a year after the original. This extra bit of story is not in the original game, nor is it in the later version of the Persona 3 Portable, which is what was ported to modern consoles. It is an FES only edition, and therefore is stuck on these even rarer PS2 discs. Even with its elusivity, the game is, well, divisive, to say the least. Many people dislike this addition to the game, and just typing in Persona 3 The Answer, one of the first videos is someone rattling on about why it sucks. A consensus that, well, a lot of people seem to agree with, which, hey, fair enough. Everyone is allowed to their opinion. But as for videos defending it, they don't really seem to exist, or if they do, really don't gather any attention. And I think this push of, yes, this bad, as the only thing about this edition is really horrible, because I think the story behind Persona 3, The Answer, is actually beautiful. If you haven't seen The Answer at all, or don't really know much behind the meaning to it, I am more than happy to explain it all here today. In this video I'm not going to be talking about the gameplay much at all. If you hate it, you hate it. To me, it's just more Persona 3, which, hey, what's not to love? What I am talking about in this video is the story and lore that gets buried in the hate for it, and the beautiful realization and conclusion to Persona 3 that many don't end up getting to experience. I'm not about to recommend you play this to see it for yourself. I've done so several times, so you don't have to. But I really do want to get this story out there. The video is going to be divided into 3 sections. The surface level story, the below level surface facts of the story, and then my theories of the meaning behind the story and the answer to it. With that said, please get comfy, get yourself a drink, a snack, whatever, because we are taking maybe the deepest dive into this story that most anyone has. This is seriously the biggest video on project I have ever worked on, and I've ended up becoming super passionate about it, and I really hope it comes out well and you guys enjoy it. This script is about 21,000 words long and 30 pages. It's taken me a month just to get the script and the footage alone, which that doesn't even include the recording and editing phases, which are probably going to be another couple of months. So that said, I really hope you enjoyed this video, and hey, I really hope it came out well. And if you know any other Persona fans, maybe share it with them. Maybe they'll get to enjoy it as well. I do have one thing to say before we start, and don't worry, it's not an ad. This video, much like the Persona games themselves, will be taking a look at religion and religious topics. I'm coming at this from a Christian perspective, but as you'll see later on, my theory is based off Catholic works, as well as bits and pieces from other religions. So I just want to take this time to ask that you just please be respectful to people and their religious beliefs, no matter what. If we can't take off the fedora and the Reddit mod badge, then this is not the video for you. It goes the same for the other side, be respectful of people being, agnostic or atheist. That's not what we're here to discuss, really. You believe what you believe, and please respect other people believing whatever they believe. Anyway, thanks for sticking through that. Let's actually get into it now. Oh, also, this goes without saying, but massive spoilers for everything. Okay, thank you.
At the tone, the time will be midnight.
The story starts on March 31st, 2010. This is after Makoto has fallen into his permanent sleep. The rest of the crew are packing to get out of the dorm they spent the last year in together, and are having a final meeting. Yukari refuses to come to the last day, and Akihiko is busy, so it's just Fuka, Mitsuru, Junpei, Ken, and Koromaru. The crew meet up and hand in their evokers and their C's bandanas. As Aigis comes in to do the same, Aigis not needing an evoker, hands in the one that belonged to Makoto. The realization puts a dour on the group, the wounds still fresh. The group then ponders what happened to Makoto, why he died. As we the audience think we know, he did it to seal Nyx away so he can't escape again, and try to kill us all again. That's the story that most Persona 3 players come to, and we'll get back to why that's wrong in a little bit. Or at least why it's only a half-truth. This is where we, and the group, get the revelation that Aigis is not going back to school for her third year with Junpei, Fuka, and Yukari. This is the first scene we see of Aigis trying to shut herself away, to run from something that becomes more apparent as we go on. The crew then decide to have dinner on the last night that they're together, eating the same sushi that they had during their celebration and journey, and watching the news of what is happening now that Nyx has been stopped. We now see what is happening with apathy syndrome.
The number of apathy syndrome cases is down from last month, which seems to mark an end to the strange illness. However, surveys show that the number of people who report serious stress in everyday life has not decreased. According to research carried out by the Ministry of Health and Welfare,
the sickness itself is going down, but people's stress and anxieties are as high as they've ever been. This will be an important thing to remember at the end of this, but for now, just leave that line at the side for later. The crew hang around till midnight, until the TV tones the start of the next day, March 31st, not April 1st. The crew, confused, decide to check out to see if anything's out of the ordinary, and after deciding that, everything seems fine, the news announcer might have just gotten the date wrong, they decide to head to bed. Here we see the start of Aigis' reason for pushing herself away from school and the crew. She's depressed after the death of Makoto, having a repeated dream about him, before eventually, she stops dreaming. She stops sleeping. As Aigis gets up from her chair, we see a blue butterfly. Now, if you've never played Persona 1 or 2, this might seem like the first time we've seen the butterfly, and if you've played Persona 5, you might remember seeing a butterfly in that game. See, in Persona 2, that butterfly was Philemon, the original head honcho of the Velvet Room, back when Igor and a couple of his associates were just sort of the background crew. But in Persona 5, we see Lavenza as this butterfly, when she's split into Justine and Caroline. Here, we see that butterfly again. I'm gonna delve into what this butterfly means properly, and who this butterfly could be in sections 2 and 3. All we need to know for now is that Aigis just got her ticket, her contract, to the Velvet Room. Immediately after this, Fuka runs into Aigis' room distressed. Here we see all hell has broken loose. The floor is cracked and opened up, and a strange figure is attacking the crew.
Much stronger than expected. I have no choice.
Is this? Is that Ordeal mode?
Iga soon overwhelms this creature before it can kill the crew. This creature is Metis, a machine just like Igus, who has come from the suddenly appearing steps in the lounge to, as she says, protect Igus. At this time, she summons her persona Athena, and as it charges Metis, it transforms into Makoto's original persona, Orpheus. Orpheus lets out this strange bass noise that seems to completely deactivate both of these robots for the time being.
Whoa! What the?
Sister.
Igus. Hey.
That's when Igus first steps foot into the Velvet Room. Igor informs Igus of the contract formed between them now, as he is now helping the new wildcard, Igus, stop whatever is happening at the dorm. Igus lets slip that Makoto once resided here too, and brings up Makoto's reaching to the answer of life. And I'll explain what I think that answer is for both him and Igus in a little bit. Yes, I will reveal the answer to life. How is that for clickbait? Igus asks that if she finds her answer, like Makoto did, will that also mean her death? To which Igor doesn't really answer her question, at least not directly. He does, however, give a quote that will be very important come endgame.
Remember this. Strength of heart, when united, is barred by no door. It was the same for that young man.
Igus then ponders if the answer to life is accepting death, and how she's just shocked that she doesn't really seem to care anymore if that's the case. Igus then awakens, remembering the journey that we learn that the Velvet Room is a place you come to in your dreams, to discover that A, Yukari and Akihiko have arrived, and B, Metis is now tied up. The group all seem relieved that Igus is okay, except for Yukari, who instead decides to complain about being dragged into whatever's going on here. Yukari is not impressed. Now this is a good time to bring up that people who have played the answer, a lot of them really do not like Yukari, and this end chapter here is to blame for that. She is uncaring about her friends, she just does not want to be there, and seems to get angry and mean to everyone there. Yukari is pretty insufferable, but there is a reason why, both in the actual story of the game, and again, what I think she represents when I get to my theories about what's all going on here. Back to the story, Igus's body has been fitted with some upgrades for the upcoming game, and Igus informs the group that the chains that are holding Metis won't actually do anything to hold her, meaning that Metis will let herself be captured. She, at this moment, means no harm. Throughout this game, and starting here, Metis will refer to Igus as her sister, and it makes sense. They are both robots, yes, but also a type of robot that Igus was said to be the last of, which means that these two here are the last of their kind. Not just sisters, the last of their family, as it were. She then explains to Igus, and by extension the rest of the group, that they're caught in a time loop, forever stuck in March 31st, where at midnight, time will skip back to midnight of March 31st. This will happen forever, unless they can break it. Metis then says that the way she figured that she could stop the time skips is by killing the group. See, the time skip is not just for them, it's happening for everyone. But the group and this dorm? Well, they're the cause, it seems. So, in Metis' mind, the easiest path to help Igus, her sister, was to kill everyone causing the problems, her friends. Metis does not seem to know the concepts of friendship and teamwork, and zeroes in on Igus being the only person she cares to save. Everyone else is just in the way, which, as you can imagine, does not lead the group to exactly welcome her into their ranks. Metis shows the group the Abyss of Time, a place under the dorm that appears to be 7 doors in a never-ending desert. She then explains that destroying the Abyss of Time is the only way to stop the time skips, again stating that the easiest way would have been killing all the dorm mates. As I said before, everyone is having these time skips, but everyone outside the dorm, they don't remember doing the exact same thing over and over again. Much like how no one remembers the Dark Hour despite it always being there. That's why this specific group seems to be the root of it. They remember it. For everyone else, it's not like Groundhog Day where they wake up and it's March 31st again and they do something different. It's always the same day and they think it's a brand new day and they'll always do the same thing. The next best plan that there is, apart from killing the doormates, is to explore the abyss and see if its depths reveal a secret to its destruction. Basically telling the group, alright, you don't want to die? Here you go, figure it out. The group seems to have a lot of questions about Metis. Why is she here for Aegis? How was she even created when Aegis was the last of her series and, from what everyone assumed, the last to survive? How does she know about the Abyss? How long has she been here? Too many things don't add up. Metis is a very suspicious character right now. Communications continues to break down until Aegis says that if this keeps on, she will go without Metis. And this triggers something in her, something we'll see a lot of. She does not want to leave Aegis' side, and it's already clear that she will kill and lie in order to reach that endpoint of sticking with Aegis. It also becomes clear that the idea of being alone in general also terrifies her, and when confronted with that possibility, she panics, saying she will do anything Aegis tells her, convincing her that she knows most about the Abyss and will try not to kill her friends. How thoughtful. Mitsuru puts Aegis in charge, as she has the power of the wildcard, and the group, Metis included, begin to investigate the Abyss. The final bit of the introduction sees Yukari ask Aegis why she has Makoto's powers all of a sudden, to which Aegis has no clue herself. Whew, now, that was very heavy for introduction text, and there's a lot to unpack there, but as we'll see as we go on, and yes, this is one of the game's flaws, the game is very front and back heavy with plot. As you'll see, we're probably going to be skimming over essentially 90% of the middle section of this game, about as quick as the 5% at the start and the end. It's mainly just battles with a little story sprinkled in. So with that being said, let's take one paragraph to quickly talk about the combat and the gameplay. Please bear with me. First things first is that the game actually forces you to play on the next hardest mode as the hardest mode of any journey save file you have. See, I thought it would always just automatically put you onto hard, because that's what I saw in a lot of forums, and also what happened to me. Playing on normal for the journey, I was then put on hard for the answer. But I know a couple people who only played on easy, and then when they played the answer, it put them on medium. So I guess the people on the forums and myself just never knew people who only played on easy, and therefore we just assumed it jumped you to hard. But that seems to be how it goes. But hey, whether you play on easy to normal or normal to hard, the difficulty is quite a shock. And even if you always play on hard, well, you're gonna have a bit of a shock as well. Because while the enemies are just plain old hard enemies, the bosses all have evade, expel to whatever weakness they have. Which, yeah, is where I end up agreeing with people who don't like this game. The boss fights. Making bosses just RNG because you might hit 10 out of your 16 hits, which would kill them, or only hit 8 out of your 16 hits, which ends up killing you, is not fun, especially when these boss fights can go for upwards of 15 minutes. Aegis plays like Makoto, however instead of having a weapon of your choice, you have Aegis' gun, which is actually really useful for first strikes. This thing is a lifesaver, I love it. I used to just always play the one-handed sword with Makoto, so using the gun here, yeah, that changed everything. The floors play out just like the main game, with a save point after a certain number of floors. Always one before a boss fight, which is nice. You can fuse and collect personas, but you don't have access to the compendium. So every run through of the answer, you have to make the personas you want with what you're given. They give you some great personas though. I mean, Cert, Odin, Thor, these are all really easy to make just by accident. So you're covered there at least. You have access to the mall to buy weapons and armor, as well as sell off your gems, but not fuse weapons and any functions that take in-game days, something you don't have here, since it's always the same day, March 31st. See? Told you, not here to analyze the gameplay that much. Let's get back into the story, shall we? The group have to make their way through 7 floors of the Abyss to get to their endpoint. Melbolg, Cocytus, Cana, Antinora, Polomia, Judeca, and Empyrean. I've probably said at least a few of those wrong, so I apologise. Now I'm going to leave these names here for now, and we'll dive into the meanings of names and conversations in Section 2 and 3. What I do want to mention in Section 1 is what happens when the crew get to the end of each floor. Every time they complete a section of the Abyss, a massive door will open up to them. The first door leads to Polonia Mall. The crew initially think, hey, they've found a way out. However, they soon realize that this is not the Polonia Mall that they know it. Rather, they've gone back to June of the previous year. Menace explains that these doors lead to the past, but only the past from the memories people have experienced, which, as we find out later, the mall is something they can all interact with, because they have all been there, shopped there, and other things there. But something we find out about Metis is that normal concepts of this world, shops, fountains, schools, these all mystify her, as if the Abyss is the only place that she's ever seen and doesn't know the outside world, as much as she pretends that she does. Gameplay-wise, this now means you can buy and sell weapons and items, which is a nice way to put a lore reason into why they can go there other than, well, I mean, they need the shop, so here you go. Now this door in Melbolg is different to the other doors we'll see. Instead of taking us back to the Desert of Doors, it takes us to the dorm itself, which is great, because now we don't have to go 15 floors to get to the shops for a Twix bar and a gun, so, good stuff. Cocytus gives us our first look at what the true purpose of these doors seems to be. Glimpses into the past. However, unlike the mall, where it is interactive since it's a shared memory, these memories are all only perceived by one person. Or in one case two, but let's not complicate things. So the crew can only watch, not interact. Since doors 2 to 6 are like this, we'll just go over what happens. Keep in mind that every time we see one of these scenes, the door fades away and cannot be accessed again, unlike Polonia Mall's door, which is always there. Cocytus. Ken. Ken's flashback seems to be immediately after the incident where his mother was killed by Shinjiro. That would put this event around 2007 by my guess, as this is where Shinji left the group after this happened. We see Ken try to explain what he saw to a cop who is not buying his story, not believing anything about teens with building-destroying powers, understandably. The cop seems to lie about his mother's cause of death, and Ken comes to the conclusion that he can't trust any adults, which is a very Persona 5 take on the situation. At this point, Ken tells the group that this was when he started to experience the Dark Hour, and Mitsuru admits that the Kirijo group would have been behind the car crash cover-up. Kana. Akihiko. Akihiko's flashback takes place when he's in middle school. Being a third year in 2009, we can imagine this takes place around 2006. Here we see a younger Mitsuru approach Akihiko after boxing and give him a proposition to join a group to fight enemies that it seems that Akihiko has been seeing at night. It seems Mitsuru has figured out that Akihiko, recently, has been able to see the Dark Hour. At this time, the group as we know it would not exist yet. The old team, which we will get to later, is down to only Mitsuru and Ikutsuki. This then would most likely be the official start of C's as a proper group, instead of just a Kirijo group cleanup operation. This is where the group starts to notice something about Metis, and how she acts. It's very rash and childlike. She doesn't want to be alone, her emotions are all over the place, her knowledge of the outside world is lacking, and her communication skills are way off. Metis is young and rash, and we find out that there is a reason for this. Anti-Nora, Junpei. We know from Persona 3's base game that Junpei awoke to the Dark Hour very shortly after we joined C's ourselves, so we can assume that this flashback takes place on one of the first nights of The Journey in April of 2009. Junpei is wandering around the mall after being appalled at the sight of his dad, drunk off his ass on cooking wine, something that we learned in Journey happened pretty often. At this point, we see Junpei find Koro wandering around the mall as well, meaning Junpei saw this dog before Fuka and Yukari did outside their dorm in The Journey. It's possible to speculate, since Koro does not get his own door, that he also awoke to the Dark Hour on this day, months before a shadow escaped and attacked him in The Journey. Of course, that's speculation which I plan to leave most of for section 2. Junpei sees his friends rock up, who plan to go drinking. After how he saw his dad, vehemently goes against joining them. Junpei confides in Koro that he wishes he could do something to change the world, a resolve that Koro seems to agree with, or at least understand. Which is another reason why I think Koro could have awoken to the Dark Hour at this point after hearing Junpei's speech to him. From here, Junpei says he went to the convenience store by the time that midnight struck, and we all know how things went from there. Polomia, Mitsuru. Here we see the Kirijo group exploring Tartarus for the first time when it was made 10 years ago, putting this flashback at the earliest we've seen, somewhere in 1999. A young Mitsuru, her dad, and Ikutsuki, as well as 4 random Kirijo members, investigate the area. Funny enough, we see that they are wearing C's armbands, showing us that Arcees was really the second form of the group. The first one is seen here, and as we see as well, without personas. Things do not go well for them. With no personas, no tame shadows, one of the members turns into a shadow himself, attacking the others and eventually Mitsuru's dad. Which, at this point, is when she awakens to her persona to protect him, which excites Ikutsuki to no end, but devastates her father, who realizes now that she's forced to deal with this mess. She can no longer escape it. As we've gone down these paths so far, after we've seen these doors, the group has seemingly become closer and closer together, chatting about the past, how they all met up, which culminates here as even after reliving this awful scene from the past, Mitsuru and Junpei are able to joke back and forth together, and the group starts laughing together as well.
But wasn't Mitsuru Senpai really cute when she was little?
Excuse me, Iori. Are you saying that's no longer the case?
No, that's not what I... Come on, you got it all wrong.
As they go further and further down, it seems like they rekindle this bond that they had, which is interesting considering what is about to come up. Judeka, Yukari. This flashback happens at the start of the school year in 2009, when Yukari first gets a letter from her dad in the 10-year time capsule. This flashback is interesting, because aside from Yukari, we already know at what point everyone's awakening happened for them. We know why Mitsuru was there, and we knew Akihiko and Shinji were there from the start of Seas 2.0. But Yukari was not a founding member of the new Seas. But she was there when we arrived, putting her in this awkward spot of not part of the forming group, but also not part of the members that we see join after us. She's been fighting to figure out what happened to her dad all that time, going head-on against the Kirijo group before, ironically, fighting alongside them. The message from her dad, and the push from hearing his voice again, is what causes her awakening. And now that we have seen all 6 doors, we can state the obvious that these doors are all the memories of C's members awakening to the Dark Hour. Or more accurately, their reason for awakening to their persona. Their reason for fighting. Which was a big plot in the journey. Some might say that Akihiko's reason was to protect those he loved after Miki's death. However, that's the reason he took up boxing, not C's. Mitsuru's push into saying that he can fight these monsters help more people. That's why he awakened himself. It's also here that we see most clearly Metis hates the fact that she has no past, no memories to share. We've seen that these characters get closer and closer together again, but this causes Metis to once again just feel really alone. And that feeling of being surrounded by just a bunch of people, but never feeling more alone than you do right now. We also learn that Metis either has no memories that she can recall, or refuses to share them with the group. Empyrean. This flashback is something I really want to elaborate more on in section 2, so for now, I want to just explain what happens and what we see, and then in section 2, we'll break down what all this means. Here, we see Aigis in a dark room, a spotlight illuminating her, and one illuminating Makoto, his back turned to her. As he walks away, Aigis tries to run after him, but gets nowhere and falls. She laments the promise she made to protect him, one that she cannot keep anymore.
I promised to protect you.
I dedicated my life to that purpose. But I can't fulfill that purpose anymore. There's nothing more I can do. Can I continue to live this way?
She's failed. Her reason for living is gone. She lays down in defeat, wishing to go back to being a mere machine, to which a flash of light appears from the darkness. The shadow that this light produces then stands up away from Aigis. Yukari begins to grill Aigis about when this took place, to which Aigis proclaims that this is just a dream she's always had, one that she'd mentioned in the beginning of the answer. This was Aigis' awakening to the wildcard abilities, not Athena. Yukari is not impressed. Metis and the group come to the conclusion that the things keeping everyone tethered here is in fact Makoto, and at that revelation, a shadow version of Makoto appears.
Just as I thought. It's coming. The monster that's taken the shape of your regrets.
Is that?
You gotta be kidding. That can't be.
The monster that has taken the shape of your regrets. As we've gone through all the different floors, we've seen this figure run off before a boss fight each time, just before the crew can see it. But to us, it's obvious that it was always Makoto. However, it seems like this is a shadow version, this monster form of him, and now that they've reached the end, they must defeat it. Makoto has the abilities of the wild card, taking on your party's personas at a whim. When he's defeated, we see a very creepy cutscene. As letters and words begin to peel off him, removing his flesh, his muscle, everything, slowly all moving away into the void, before becoming more of the blue butterflies we've seen before. The crew has beaten the shadow of their regrets, however this does not mean the end for them. Metis finally tells the group something that they had no idea about until now. That personas are just shadows that have been tamed by their respective humans. This is something that plays a very big part in Persona 4, so it's cool to see it shown here, before Persona 4 ever set underway in the timeline. These personas are also the reason why the Abyss did not go away with Tartarus. The crew then, once the battle is over, receives a key each. These keys are their way out, and the way to destroy the Abyss. There is a caveat, however. All 8 keys must be used together, and Strength of Heart, when united, is barred by no door. So, simple, right? Where's the issue? Well, there are 2 doors. The door to freedom, and the door to him. The crew now has a choice. Leave through the front door, back to the present, or to go back to the past to see Makoto alive once again, just before the fall. To accept the past, or revisit it, as Mitsuru puts it, is the choice that they must now come to unanimously, which is easier said than done. In fact, Persona 3 The Answer does something that the Persona games, especially post 2, have never done. The team is split, becoming rivals. Even after everything they've been through together, this choice is enough to absolutely destroy their bonds. As the crew come back to the lounge, they see large cracks everywhere. They're running out of time. They need to choose fast, but they cannot. Instead of coming to a decision as a group and talking about it, the team splits up and prepares to fight, seemingly to the death, over the choice. As the crew get more and more here than a Persona team ever seems to have gotten, to the point of personal attacks at some points, Yukari and Mitsuru team up to go to the past. Akihiko and Ken team up to go to the present. Junpei and Koro decide that the decision made by fighting is a pointless one. However, they still decide that the present is what's best. Which is a big point of contention. Why are Junpei and Koro fighting Akihiko and Ken when they agree with them? And that's something I will explain more in section 2 and 3 because I found myself pondering this a lot. Maybe most out of anything when I was playing and going over this video and this review. Aigis and Metis have not decided yet. But with the fight underway, Metis tells the group that they could end up killing Aigis. So Aigis is forced to fight, and Metis goes to her primary goal, to protect Aigis. She still doesn't know the right answer yet. Yukari is not impressed. Metis takes the crew to Colossio Purgatorio to fight, a place where humans won't die when defeated, but Aigis, she still will. Now, the fact that this place is called Purgatorio really excited me, and is a massive bit of section 2 and 3, and I'm really excited to get to the meat of it, but for now, we will stick to the surface story. We find out that Metis also awakened here in Colossio, but before that can be expanded upon, we have our first battle with Akihiko and Ken. Upon hearing that Aigis has still not made up her mind, Akihiko apologizes but moves on with the battle regardless.
Sorry, but if you haven't made up your mind by now, I can't let you have our keys.
Once they lose, they are turned into flames that light up torches in the Colosseums. It seems that this is temporary though. Once the conflict is over, they will come back. This really pisses off Aigis, the turning into flames, not coming back, to the point where she cuts her bond with Metis, telling her not to call her sister anymore. Something that we have seen throughout this whole game was a big thing for Metis. Distraught, she still however fights alongside Aigis to protect her. Next is Junpei and Koro. Junpei pretty much admits that he is scared of walking towards the present, but knows in his heart it's the right choice. He's afraid to push forward, but also knows that Yukari has it backwards, and her idea of trying to perform a miracle better than Makoto is just not plausible.
No matter which way this turns out, I just don't think Aigis can win against Yucatan right now. Sorry. Then again, I don't think Yucatan's got it right either. Even if we go back to before the final battle, if we're still squabbling like this, I don't know, do you really see us being able to pull off a miracle and do things better than he could? Me, I think this is something we gotta take care of on our own.
Aigis at this point decides that hurting her friends is no longer worth it, and plans to give her key to Yukari and Mitsuru, which would kill her. Metis tries everything in her power to stop Aigis from doing this, including even going as far as to say that she will give up her life for Aigis, so that she can live on and won't leave Metis behind.
I went to see you so I could save you, but I ended up causing the power to awaken. That's why I made up my mind I'd do anything to protect you. Even if it meant you'd hate me for it. You're all I have in the world.
Metis. There was a time when I felt the same way about someone, but I still can't hurt the people who gave me my heart, even if the end result of this power is death.
I don't want you to die! If you're not gonna give in, you still don't need to throw your life away. If you end up losing your key, I'll give you my life.
This seems to snap Aigis back to her senses, and realizes that she's just running away once again, like she did with school, wanting to just abandon her emotions. She comes up with an answer, but we as the audience aren't told it yet. Now we come across Yukari and Mitsuru, the final battle for the keys. Yukari claims that she figured it would come down to a battle at some point, and for the first time now, it is Aigis who is not impressed. When Aigis finally tells them that she's made her decision to not look back to the past despite the pain, Yukari comments on how Aigis was sounding very mechanical before, which is something that is important later on.
You sound like you're back to your usual self again. You know, I have to say, you've been a little out of it lately. It was kinda disappointing, because you were acting all mechanical, like when you first got to the dorm. But now, I'd say you've got more life in you than ever.
Once they're defeated, the crew come back and the true key is formed in Aigis' hands. Yukari is not impressed. In fact, she is now so unimpressed that despite this whole fight for whoever is right, she still tries to wrestle the key out of Aigis' hands, stopping at nothing to get that door open. To steal, manipulate, even kill the people who were her friends throughout all of this, stabbing her closest friends in the back for this key, explaining that she made a promise to Makoto as well. However, she made hers holding his cold hand.
I made a promise to him too. I promised that I'd try my best to change this world so that people would stop wishing for the fall. It wasn't like yours. It was something I promised myself while holding his cold hand.
Her promise fell on lifeless ears. Unlike Aigis, she got to be there for the final moments of his life. She admits that she's unable to move on, that she isn't strong enough, and that she plans to see him again, whatever the cost. Mitsuru tries to talk Yukari down from her position, telling her that her friends are still there for her, which... what a champ! After Yukari essentially sent them all to die killing each other, that Mitsuru and the others are still there for her. Aigis tells the group of her decision, to see the past again before using the key. See, all the other doors disappeared once their purpose was fulfilled, but one door has stayed open. The first one, to Polonia Mall. However, this confuses Metis because its first seen purpose was to prepare the crew for their fights against the Abyss. But that battle's been over. This last bit's just been the crew fighting each other. So why is it still open? Unless there's another purpose.
But you mention it. That is strange. Once a door's purpose has been fulfilled, it disappears. If that door's purpose is to prepare for battle, it should have vanished once the battles were over. Our fight afterward was just bickering between ourselves.
And sure enough, that seems to be the case. Upon entering the door, they come not to the mall, but to the Desert of Doors again. But this time, a large door stands in the middle. This unnamed door is the door to post-Nyx fight, the past they wish to see. The crew prepare to face whatever may happen, and they press on through the door. The crew enters the door to see Makoto again, just as he's about to seal Nyx away. The group watches as he seals Nyx, as they already knew, but then sees Makoto turn into this massive stone statue.
Is the miracle he performed.
Well, massive relative to human size, blocking a really massive door, arms spread out to guard the door that Nyx is behind, physically sealing it away. He becomes the Great Seal. And for the people that play the journey, that's all they know. That's the end to Makoto's story. However, there is more. Nyx, as Metis claims, is not a malevolent entity. A seal's are necessary to keep it in. It's not trying to get out. So most people would tell you that the story of Persona 3 is keeping Nyx sealed away from humanity. However, the truth is the opposite. Makoto is keeping humanity away from Nyx. As the team converse, a massive beast rises up from beneath the ground, grabbing at Makoto, trying to rip that seal off, trying to get to Nyx.
Everyone, look! A shadow. So many. All those peoples.
As I thought, the seal's real purpose. It wasn't to hold back Nyx. It was a seal so that it couldn't be touched.
What do you mean? That monster isn't a shadow. It's the accumulated malice that came from the hearts of countless living people. All of them, deep down, are calling Nyx.
That can't be.
Last December, I too wished to learn death. It's probably true that people in town are wishing to touch it somewhere in their hearts. There is only one thing that differentiates life from stillness. It's that we die. That's all there is.
I think I understand. When your life loses its meaning, the fact of death can be kind of comforting. That lurking malice we're unaware of is strong enough to give birth to such a huge monster. And maybe that's just how it is these days.
What's it doing?
This beast is humanity. All of humanity's torment and stress are calling out to Nyx, trying to get that seal open. Again and again, it tries to get the seal off, but it fails each and every time. At the start of this, I said to keep in mind that the news reporter says that while apathy syndrome has gone down, stress is as high as ever, and this is what brought Nyx back in the first place. If humanity continues to live like this, we will always call back to Nyx. Makoto's not there for Nyx, it's there for this creature, Erebus. The team defeats Erebus, finally calling the end to their fight. They can finally go home and set the world back forward. The crew now have a new goal, as they have seen. If they can help people, calm their stresses, their griefs, their sorrows, Erebus will weaken, and people will stop yearning for Nyx. The seal, Makoto, can rest. Yukari is impressed. Yukari apologizes to Aigis and admits that it was her jealousy for Aigis that was driving her attitude, wanting to make a promise to a live Makoto, much like Aigis was able to. The crew congregate at the front door, and as Aigis opens it, they're ready to continue living, moving forward into April. There is one last piece of this story though. The entire crew is transported to the Velvet Room before they go back to the world they know, where Eagle's a bit surprised that the crew's followed Aigis in, congratulating her all the same. Metis tells Aigis now that she can now continue to keep her promise to protect Makoto by helping humanity no longer feel the need to call upon Nyx, with the friendship that helped guide her to this decision. Aigis has her answer to life, and that answer is not death, rather to keep on living and to help others. Finally, we find out who Metis truly is. She is Aigis. Her emotions that were cast aside the day of March 31st that transformed into Metis. Metis now has her human thoughts and feelings as well because, well, they're her. Aigis went back to not needing sleep, to not dreaming, to not sounding mechanical because she cast away the part of her as she ran away from the truth. Now she and Metis are finally back together as one.
As well, you're truly alive now. From now on, we'll always be together. Sister, I'm coming home.
Welcome back. I feel tired. I haven't felt this way in a while. When I went back to being a machine, I no longer required sleep.
And Aigis finally again feels the need to sleep. The crew wake up and come to the conclusion they all share this experience before trying to wake up Aigis, which she does not.
Hey, Aigis, how long are you gonna lie there? Wake up! Aigis! Mitsuru-senpai!
Panicked, the crew take her to her room to try and figure out what's wrong. Fuka learns that her synaptic circuits, basically the connections in her robotic brain telling her to move her body, have fried, possibly due to her wildcard abilities. Just as they mourn the fact that they may never get their proper Aigis back, she awakens. Apparently, even without the circuits that should be telling her body to move and receive power, she's functioning as if she is now fully alive. Which might sound like a very cheesy line, but I want to bring back this idea in section 2 as to why this is actually integral to the story at large. Aigis tells the group that she's finally dreaming again, and the group decides to finally get some rest. The relief of Aigis being alive and back to her normal self, and the ordeal being over, finally letting exhaustion set in. Before this, however, Mitsuru gives a final announcement. She is recalling the evokers. The crew now hold on to these evokers until the day everyone can change. Our final scene shows the next morning as the crew are packed and ready to leave. This time, both Yukari and Akihiko in tow. The car Mitsuru called to take Aigis back to the lab soon arrives before Aigis makes a last-minute decision, begging Mitsuru to let her go back to school with the others.
I know it might not be possible because it's so sudden, but is there some way that I can back out of returning to the lab? Before, I thought there was nothing left for me to protect, no reason to live. But now that I see otherwise, I'd like to go back to school with Yukari-san and everyone.
Aigis.
I want to continue to experience new things with you all. Is it too late?
She obliges, and Aigis can now stay with the crew. As Aigis locks the door behind him, the last they ever see of the dorm that we spent this whole game in, both the journey and the answer, Yukari offers Aigis be her dorm mate.
If you're gonna live in the dorms, you wanna be my roommate?
Huh?
I mean, you need one, right? But hey, no need to be so formal. We are friends, aren't we?
Yeah, you're right.
Saying they are friends, as Aigis takes Yukari's hand to lead him to the others as they ride off into the new year as a group. And that's the end of the story of Persona 3 The Answer. But what does this all mean for the group, for the story at large, and what ideas and things were put right in front of us that we may have missed? Well, that's where we move to section 2, the story below the surface.
At the tone, the time will be midnight.
So now going through just the surface level story, we can see that the real driving force of Persona 3 The Answer is about Aigis living in regret that she can no longer fulfill the promise that she gave Makoto in the journey. That promise to always protect him. In the time between the journey and the answer, Aigis has fallen into a depression, having this same recurring dream over and over about losing Makoto, and wishing that she could get rid of this newfound humanity that she's gained, that's causing her so much grief. Eventually her wish is granted, as Metis is formed from her will to go back to being mere machine, all of Aigis' emotions being transferred into her, which is why Metis is much more hot-headed and fast to act. Metis thinks with her heart, Aigis thinks with her head, and it takes both of these to come together to come to the conclusion they need. First, a quick point that unlike Persona 3, or really any Persona game from 1 to 5, this story is not happening in real time for us. This is Aigis recounting the events after the fact.
The fact that a future exists and being able to access it are very different things. We did not understand such an obvious and natural principle yet.
Like I've said before, it's just weird that the game tries to give us this whole string along of will she, won't she die, when our answer through the story hinges on living as she's recounting it after the fact. I guess you could say that this is something being recounted after their final Velvet Room visit, when she falls back asleep. But when added with everything else, I don't think that's the case. The case could be made though. The narration stops after that point, seeming to go back to the normal Persona storytelling lens of happening in the moment, so hey, just some food for thought. Now why the designers chose this way of storytelling is something that I want to get in section 3, so stay tuned for that one. I wanted to take this section to talk about little lines that I liked and somehow seemed to foreshadow events, which would have been weird to do in section 1 because that would involve talking about the plot sort of all over the place, going back and forth from the start to the end, and it would just make it really messy, so I decided, let's just get all the plot out of the way, make sure we're all caught up, and then get into this. The first interesting bit of dialogue happens before anything weird even happens in the story. As the group sits around having their last meal together, they talk about the lingering effects of Strega, and Mitsuru says this.
That's out of our hands, I'm afraid. We prevented the fall, but we can't reform society.
This is just so cool because we're less than 9 minutes into the game, haven't touched a single button, and right there we have Aigis' answer and the meaning to life being talked about. To reform society, or rather how they think. And you would never catch that on your first go around. It's hidden so perfectly as just flavor text that you would never assume it's a foreshadowing moment. And if you did, well, you're a wizard, Harry, and a thumping good one, I reckon. Please teach me your secrets. There's also this running theme upon playing the game where, much like Makoto, you really just talk to Korra-chan through his barks and facial expressions and body language, not understanding him as much. This might be seen as a story way to cover up the fact that, as Aigis, canonically you can now speak to Korra in quote-unquote English, which would be a bit far out there to the player. But then there's the fact that Metis can understand Korra perfectly. As you go through the game, and Aigis gets a little bit of her humanity back, bit by bit, she starts to understand Korra much better. And this again is just really cool foreshadowing to the fact that Metis is Aigis' emotions. She can understand Korra, while Aigis cannot, because this ability was cast aside with the loss of her emotions. Again, it's just a super cool touch. It didn't make sense to break this up in section 1, so I wanted to mention that here as well. Now I mentioned this butterfly that lands on Aigis just before the staircase breaks out in the dorm. And I really just wanted to talk about what this butterfly actually means. It is something that I'll bring up later at the end of section 2, but I do want to just bring everyone up to speed that we will be touching a lot more on this butterfly, and the fact that this butterfly could be someone we are a bit familiar with. The first Aigis and Metis fight uses personas. This is also an interesting detail because it tells us that we are right now in a weird space. This is not the real world, or I guess the non-Dark Hour world. Personas could only be used in the Dark Hours, so the fact that we're using them here, in the seemingly normal dorm, no Dark Hour in sight, already tells us that things are wrong. Not much more to say about this one, I just thought it was cool. Something interesting about Aigis' visit to the Velvet Room is what Igor says to her at one particular point.
Ah, a very rare guest indeed. Are you a simulacrum or in fact human? It seems your destiny is similar to mine.
Now for those that have only played games past Persona 3, I'm about to blow some minds. Igor is a puppet, created by some mysterious force. Originally I thought it was Philemon, but that is not the case. Igor is not human, or at least was not born human. Aigis too was not born human. However, both are now seeking what it means to be human. Igor being a puppet made human, seeking his humanity, and Aigis being a robot made human, also seeking her humanity. The two are travelling very similar journeys, which all that came from 2 sentences, and just when I first learned that, I was in awe. That is just such good world building, and I never knew. As the crew enters the Abyss of Time for the first time, we see the first real interaction between Metis and Aigis, and how it really goes hard into how these two will play off each other. Aigis is cold and methodical. She, like a robot, comes to conclusions rationally, knowing that her friends are important, as is stopping the abyss of time, and then tries to problem solve on how to achieve both these solutions, thinking very rationally. Metis gets very emotional very quickly, acting rashly to questions, being upset when Metis plans to go without her, thinking and acting with her heart. Throughout the whole game, the crew will call this childlike behavior, and in a way, yes it is, but it's not exactly the case. Metis acts with her heart and doesn't take time to think on decisions or come to conclusions on how things will play out in the future. It's childlike in its way of children not having rationing abilities, going off gut reaction. It isn't inherently what it's like to be a child, it just calls to a more childlike perspective of the world, thinking very immediately. The 7 floors of the Desert of Doors, which sounds like a weird children's book, are all named after circles of hell, or I guess rather pockets inside a specific circle of hell from Dante's Inferno. All except the last one, technically the first one not being from floor 9, but let's not get into that. I'll go through what all the names mean here quickly. Maelbolg, the first door, is the 8th circle of hell. And we're starting off a bit deep here. The 8th out of 9 circles of hell is for those whose sin is fraud. Why fraud is so deep down in hell is essentially the idea that they misuse the love and trust of friends and family to trick people for their own gains, which is interesting when you think back on when we first saw Metis trying to use a sense of family and love to get the crew and Aigis to do what she wants. Is it for her own gain? Well, as Metis, no, it's not for her own gain, but as Aigis? Well, now, technically, it is so. I don't think that that's what the game was going for here, but I think it is an interesting comparison when you learn that Metis is Aigis, and it also is interesting just to see why we get to this layer of hell so early on. Cocytus is the frozen lake that takes us to the start of the final circle of hell. See, the 8th circle was very deep to start us off with, but that was just us dipping our toes in, getting ready to explore quite fully the 9th and final circle of hell. Now, Dante and Virgil in the book of Dante's Inferno had a giant from the 8th circle lower them down here, but with no giants in tow, the crew just used the stairs. Here, people are frozen into this river, just their heads sticking out in the early parts of the layer, but as we go on, deeper down, people are just buried, face up in it, unable to see any of the outside world. Their tears freezing over their face, just making this horrifying mask of torment. And here, we see Ken's flashback. This is Ken's lair. Now, the scenes themselves don't seem to tie into these levels of hell. I don't think that's the point. I think the point is the scenes are surface level, when people awaken to their power. But their order is weird. We don't see these scenes in order, we seem to zigzag. From June 2009 to 2007, to April 2009 to 2006, from March 2009 to 1999. These scenes do have a perfect zigzag, starting at the latest date of 2009, going down to the earliest past dates, and then the next point of 2009, down to a lower year, so on and so on. But why order it like this at all? Why not just start at June 2009 at the mall, and then go back in time more and more as we go, ending on Mitsuru? And I believe the reason for that is what the layers mean for the characters themselves. We covered how Maelbolg itself doesn't have any flashbacks, but seem to be a group experience. They've all been there, before slipping further down into hell. But again, this could be a circle that Metis fits into nicely when you know that she's Aigis. However, I think a better explanation is that fraud is a base sin that they all share. And now as we go down, we see these little sub-treacheries. Let me explain a bit better. Cocytus is the circle for treacherous fraud. Now before we fully get into this, I assume that everyone here has at least played or knows the full story of The Journey, and I don't need to tell you that I don't think these characters are bad people, and I'll explain the reasons behind these comparisons and why they may seem funky at first. First, let's get through the layers, then break open the real juicy meaning of why they're here. That paints a horrible image. With that out of the way, Ken fits treacherous fraud. Ken came into the group to find an answer to who killed his mum. The cops don't believe his story, and adults don't seem to either. He is disillusioned and needs to find it out on his own. So he joins C's. Ken is the only person to ask to join, not be asked by Ikutsuki to join. Ken has an ulterior motive. Shinji. Ken seemingly joined the group he knows was responsible for killing his mum to find out the individual who was behind it. So in his flashback, he knows, he saw that it was a team, he just needs to figure out which one. And when he does find out, he carries out his plan to lure Shinji off and kill him. Now, his own teammate in this fight, betraying the trust that the team had in him. Now we have Kaina, which this one breaks my heart, I'm not gonna lie. We have like 3 circles to go. Oh boy. Kaina is Akihiko, and Kaina is for those who betrayed relatives. Now this one is just, oh boy, this one's messed up. But before I even saw who was cordoned off to which level, I knew Akihiko would be here, and I was right. Akihiko had a sister, Miki, who lived at the same orphanage as Akihiko and Shinji. When the orphanage caught on fire, Miki died. Akihiko couldn't save her. Which is so messed up that he was put in this circle because, like my forewarning said, there is nothing that could have been done. This is all circumstances out of him and Shinji's control. Nevertheless, Akihiko is here. The circle for those who betrayed their family. Next is Auntie Nora, which is the second main circle of Kikaitis, left for people who were treasonous. This is where we see Junpei, and this might be weird to think at first. I don't see Junpei going to any anti-Japanese spy rants in this game. In fact, he grows up to be a big baseball star, which is as Japanese as you can get. But while this section is for traitors, the wording might make it more clear. For those who betrayed their side or country. Side. Now that makes more sense. Junpei's here for his ties to Chidori. Chidori was a member of the other side who ended up using Junpei, getting him to talk about his team's plans, and then using Junpei as a tool to try and one-up the group. Because of Junpei's ties to the enemy, information about the team gets leaked, and that causes a lot of issues. Polomia is the level just above Judecca, the lowest level of hell. This circle is here for those who betrayed guests and hosts, but for this comparison we're going to look at the guests aspect. And yeah, you can definitely see how this would fit into Mitsuru. The Kirijo group brought so many institutions, scientists, people into their branch, into their home as it were, and in the process of their experiments put their lives in danger, killing people, destroying families, completely ruining the lives of those around them for a decade or more to come. Mitsuru spends basically most of her life at this point trying to fix what in her mind was her family welcoming these people under them and betraying them by letting harm befall them. Judecca is another name for Judecca, and thanks to its anglicized name, it's very easy to tell who this layer is named after. This circle is for those who betrayed masters and benefactors, basically those that took things from those who helped them get through life, get back on their feet, gave them a job and a purpose, and then turned it back on them. You know, betraying a parent, betraying someone who gave up parts of their life to help you by spitting back in their face, and the worst, betraying God himself. Thus we see the man who gets tortured the most sticking out of the mouth of Lucifer himself, Judas. And this circle is where we see Yukari. This circle gave me the most trouble. Yukari is this character who just does this 180 flip in the answer. She's becoming just so unlikable, and really through the entirety of Journey and Answer really just does have a lot of different ways that we could take this. But I think the fact that they used the more character-driven name of J.U.D. Decker, we can take a stab at this. The problem is a lot of that stab goes into my theory in section 3, so I can't say much here, as this level is a lot of my future talking point. Honestly, Yukari could be seen more of an important character than even Metis in the answer. secondary to only Aigis herself in importance here, assuming my guess is right anyway. So let's just stick with the super broad strokes here. Yukari blames herself for the death of Makoto, not being able to help him, wanting to go back to help him. She feels she betrayed the friend who gave her everything, another shot at life, another reason to go on, the person who gave her everything. Maybe even thinking she betrayed her dad as well. Again, even though she was just a small kid, like Mitsuru, she could see her dad's death as partially her fault. Another look at this betrayal of benefactor, the man who raised her. As we see in the journey, she was a lot closer to him than she ended up being to her mum. Thanks for sticking through that. If your favourite character was in there being treated like a criminal, you probably hate me, but here's where I hopefully redeem myself. See, these characters all fit their layers with a bit of stretching, but they fit the levels to a T if you don't take it at face value. Rather, we remember what Metis said after Empyrean, that this place, these apparitions, are based on their regrets. That's what these doors really are. They aren't characters being sent to actual inferno for these crimes, rather these circles just represent their regrets. Ken had all the reason in the world to find out what happened to his own mum, taken from him at such a young age, but his regrets in his actions lead him here, to his own personal Kokaitis. Akihiko had no hand in the fire. He tried and he couldn't save Miki, but he still blames himself for it. He's not strong enough in his mind. He sees himself as betraying her, now in his own personal Kaina. Junpei had significant growth, I think we can all agree, and that's exactly why he feels such pain and remorse for Chidori despite coming to an understanding of it. Because he did grow up and learn what real love and connection is, now he can understand what he's really lost. Mitsuru still feels responsible for all of this because it was under the Kirijo name, despite being a literal child when this all took place, and hell, even her dad felt the same regret for something that he didn't do, and also spent a decade trying to fight it. Yukari feels like she let Makoto down, feels like there's something she herself could have done, even though, as we know, there is no alternative. And Aigis has that same remorse for breaking that promise, even though, again, nothing could be done. The game's not calling these characters out as bad or evil, we're just seeing the events they struggle with, through their own eyes. In their eyes, they are responsible. So when we see it, we see them in these layers of hell, for people who have done what they think they have done. The Abyss of Time is a space of pure self-reflection for these characters, and that is why it is here for them, and why, as Metis explains, killing them would probably get rid of the Abyss too. But I mean, I don't need to tell you that committing the old cranium piercing is not a good way to deal with regrets. This is the reason why the doors are named so, why they are named after circles of hell at all, and more importantly, such a tight, similarly themed cluster in one circle of hell. Now that we have the reasons behind the naming, we can get more into what the crew see behind the doors at the bottom of these levels. The first door leads them to Polonia Mall, where Metis tells the crew about how these doors lead to past events based on their inner thoughts. This leads into what we discussed in section 1, about the reasons the crew sees what they do at their own particular doors. These are every member's moments of their awakening to their power, their reasons for fighting, and more importantly, their awakening to the Dark Hour. This is best seen in Junpei's case, where we know that the day he awakened to his reason to fight, as told by these doors, is the day where we know in the journey he woke for the first time to the Dark Hour, when he met Akihiko. Fuka is excluded from this because we saw both her reason and her realization of the Dark Hour in the journey, unlike Junpei where we only got his realization, or Yukari where we got neither really. We find out later in the journey that her dad was this reason, which is confirmed in the answer, but at the point of the journey that was just an educated guess, not fact that the game told us. Now Metis tells us these doors are based on these shared inner thoughts. So when the question comes up of, well, why can they go to the mall but the flashbacks only involve the one person while the rest are spectators, It's because they all have memories of being at and going to this mall, so they can all interact with it. So you may have caught on that this leads to one glaring issue. Metis herself. Metis was never at Polonia Mall, so how can she interact with it? The game tells us she's never been there, because she's confused at what a shop is, and what a fountain is. But of course at the end of the game, we know that Metis is Aigis. So why can they all interact with it? Because they have all been there. Metis is Aigis, so Metis has experienced these memories of this place just like the rest of them, even though she doesn't remember. Even here, at the end of the very first dungeon, the game hints at us Metis' true identity. If you're able to catch it on your first run through, you'll definitely be asking, well, how is she here? Is it a loophole? And it is just really cool that this isn't a loophole. Quite the opposite, this is a great piece of foreshadowing, and going through it a second time, I was a big fan of it. At the end of Ken's door, they once again argue with Metis about how these doors are showing them this stuff for a reason. Ken comes to a conclusion that despite how crappy times were back then, there was a passion, a reason for doing what they did. And he mentions how Akihiko took up boxing once again, and Akihiko here, right after Dungeon 2, flat out admits that, yes, things seem to be going back to how they were. He doesn't want to feel weak again, he still holds on to these regrets. At this revelation, Yukari just immediately whips around and chastises them for going down this thought path, which startles the two. And the game does indicate this to us with the trademark exclamation mark over their heads, indicating some sort of shock or startlement instead of just ... for silence. She just says how thinking about the past is all a waste, and at this point it's clear that she's running from those same regrets, but she refuses to admit it, even to herself. After Akihiko's door, Metis ruminates over what a school is, and after some back and forth, Metis asks Aigis if she goes to school. She explains that she did, but she won't be going this year. Metis asks why not. She has fond memories there, and all her friends are there. Metis begins to explain why, but she seems confused as to why herself.
Huh? How come? All your friends go. They are your friends, right? You like to be around them, don't you?
Before just saying it was her own decision to. Here, Aigis is mirroring Yukari. She's also running from her regrets, and she also cannot admit, even to herself. In her case, to such an extreme that she literally yanked that part away of her to not deal with it. I decided to mention these two after-door events here and not back in section 1, because they really wouldn't make sense unless I talked about the reason behind the doors and the names and flashbacks and their links to regrets, and it would have been a lot messier doing a back and forth trying to sort of do two separate stories all at once. Because there are two stories going on here, and after some of the doors we see the story of the surface, why they're here, why they're doing this, and then we see the secondary story unfold with another part of the doors of how things are transpiring for them after these events, what they're running from, why these regrets are manifesting. Speaking of, now we can get to the meat of what we see in the last door, in the bottom of Empyrean. I left this one out of section 1 because I want to explain everything that happens in detail without tiptoeing around things that we had not seen yet in the story recap. So here we go. Empyrean. Metis. This flashback takes place on late February to early March 2010, the last night that Aigis sleeps before the event. As on the night of March 31st, she tells us that she has lost the ability to sleep. Here we see Aigis' last dream, one she had over and over again, but this time it goes a bit differently. Aigis wakes up sitting in an empty space, a spotlight illuminating her. Another spotlight then illuminates Makoto ahead of her. He starts walking away, and Aigis tries to run after him, to no avail. As she trips and falls, she calls out for him not to go, before he disappears out of sight. As Aigis stands up, she laments not being able to keep her promise to Makoto, to protect him. It was her reason for living, and her original reason for awakening. she's lost that meaning. The meaning to continue to live on. As she sits down in defeat, she asks to go back to being a mere machine. At which point, a blinding light from the direction that Makoto left from illuminates Aigis, and as her shadow grows behind her, a figure steps out from it. This is the second Metis was born into the world. The second that Aigis once again became machine. Aigis, like Fuka, awakened to her reason to fight in the journey, so like Fuka, there's no reason to show it. The doors are not showing Aigis' awakening. This is Metis' awakening. You may say that this is the reason for Aigis' second awakening. However, it's clear that the reason for that has not yet come, and the reason for her wildcard ability was A, to help her friends, and B, something I want to explain in Section 3. I know there's so much bait for Section 3, but I promise it's all worth it. All you need to know for now is that in terms of the surface reason behind the doors, this is Metis', not Aigis'. The crew are confused as to why this is the cause of it all, and while the game uses some way to explain it, I again want to talk about this dream sequence in Section 3. Oh yeah, this 30-second scene is going to span across all 3 sections. We got the explanation of events just as they are, now we have what they mean, but in Section 3 I want to explore what that light was and why it came from Makoto's direction. After we see Aigis' dream, we find out that while her regrets were failing to protect Makoto, this is something the group actually all share. This is the big shared regret that they all have that is holding them to this place. Because of their desire to change the past, to help Makoto, they are now stuck in the past, weighed down by their regrets. And now is the time to fight those regrets head on, and so we get the fight against Makoto's shadow. Now it could be argued that this is Makoto's real shadow, but I have another theory. It appears as though Aigis' persona transformed into Orpheus at the start. However, what if that was the real Orpheus? What is the distinction? Well, as Metis says, personas are just tamed shadows. So if that's the real Orpheus, then this is Makoto's real shadow. That would also be how Aigis gains the wildcard ability, because she now possesses Makoto's real shadow. What that all comes down to then, is that this shadow is a complete imposter. It is in no way the real Makoto. It's just the personification of their shared regret in a familiar form. They all know how Makoto fought, even Metis, since again, she's Aigis. So much like the mall, she also has this shared memory that they all have. And that's why they can fight exactly like Makoto, and how he uses his wildcard ability to shift to the crew's personas, since they all know how each other's personas work as well. While fake Makoto's death scene is not the real person at all, I think it does give us something really important. I think the scene is a mirror of what happened to the real Makoto, as he basically rotted and decayed into nothing, eventually to be reborn as the seal as he turns into tens of blue butterflies. Now, I said in Section 1 that the blue butterfly might be someone we're a bit familiar with. Now, in Persona 2, the character Philemon, who was killed in Persona 1, turned into this blue butterfly, and until, if we don't count this scene, it wasn't until Persona 5 that we saw the blue butterfly again, that being Lavenza, who turned into a blue butterfly after her death. See, they were both denizens of the Velvet Room, and it's clear that denizens of the Velvet Room share a lot of powers with each other. And one of these powers, I believe, is the ability to turn into these butterflies upon death, to speak with or guide people back to the Velvet Room. In Persona 2, this was Philemon after his death. In Persona 5, it was Lavenza, who became the butterfly to talk to Joker after she was killed. In Persona 3, it's no butterfly that reaches Makoto, it's Thanatos who hands him the contract. The only time we see this butterfly reach out to someone in Persona 3 is here with Aigis, after Makoto's death. As we see in this cutscene, upon his death, Makoto seems to have gained this Velvet Room ability to become a butterfly after his death. And when he does, he uses it to contact Aigis, and begin this whole journey. Why? Well, that's what I want to discuss in section 3. If you look closely though, this is not the only time we see butterflies. At the very start of all this, as Metis attacks the crew and flips into Orgia mode, we see butterflies everywhere around her. If you know that this is a power that is only granted to the denizens of the Velvet Room, then you may have already guessed, Metis is technically of the Velvet Room. At the end of the game, when the whole team enters the room, we see Metis already ahead of the crew, standing with Igor on that side of the room, ready to explain everything to Aigis. Upon entering the Velvet Room, much like Mona in Persona 5 or Marie in Persona 4, her memories come back, and they're tied to this place. Again, just really cool, super early foreshadowing. But back to the present time. The Makoto imposter is defeated, the reason behind their regrets has been vanquished. So, why are they still here? Why is the Abyss of Time still here? Well, they may have beaten this physical form of their regrets, but in reality, they've learned nothing. No one grew from this fight. To them, it was just another enemy beaten. Despite staring their regrets right in the face, fighting them head on, they still cling to them desperately, some more than others. Yukari. So when they get these keys, the ability to prove that they have moved on, a massive fight breaks out, because these guys still don't want to move on. Speaking of this fight, now I finally get to talk about Purgatorio Colossio. I've been biting my tongue on this one since section 1, because really it again would not have made sense to talk about it there. But now we've gone through the meaning behind the names of the doors and our characters' regrets, which means I can finally go over it. First off, Metis. She was born here, as she says. She was born in Purgatory. Not really belonging, but still here. Metis is not her own person, we now know that. She is something that was somehow born from Aigis, but not really meant to exist. She exists in a sort of limbo, where she exists, but not really. And so being born in Purgatory is a perfect place for a character like her to be born, stuck between worlds, trying to usher others out. But we'll get more into that last sentence in section 3, about ushering others out. More importantly, we see our characters traverse the very depths of hell, the final inner circle, and then we see them get to the very top of heaven, to Empyrean, where they get their answer. And now they've fallen all the way back down to Purgatory? In Dante's Divine Comedy, Purgatory's at the bottom of the earth. So we've basically gone below the earth, then above it, and now we're stuck back on earth, in a nothing void. So why are they here? How do we get from heaven to Purgatory? Because they learned nothing. Now with Yukari and Mitsuru it's obvious. They stared down their regrets and fought it, but outright rejected its meaning. They still want to go to the past. For Akihiko and Ken, they stared their regret down, but they're still being guided by their past. They're making the right choice to move on, yes, but only because of past events. Only for how Makoto would want it, not for their own reasons to move on. Aigis and Fuka have both looked at the answer and gained nothing from it. They still lack the ability to make any decision for themselves. They don't know what to do. Junpei and Koro are terrified of the past. They don't want to go, especially Junpei, because the fear of going back to that fight with Nyx and losing this time is too much to bear. They already beat Nyx once, why do it again? But just like Akihiko, this view of moving forward towards the future stems solely on the past. In this case, the fear of it. They are still all trapped by their regrets in a level of purgatory. They cannot escape until they figure out what they want to do with this answer they have been given. And Purgatorio is a great place to do that, because they cannot die here. Well, most can't. Aigis can. But why exactly? Well, one could say that it's simply because Aigis is a robot, ergo there is no real soul to keep as a flame to then be revived once the conflict is over. But once again we now have the knowledge from sections 1 and 2, and we can ponder over the real answer this might be. When Aigis cast off her emotions and humanity into Metis, The reason she was able to take form at all, I believe, is because Aegis literally cast off her soul. She returned to being mere machine without a soul, and in essence, that soul died, turned into a fireball, and ended up in Purgatorio, like we see with the others. When this fireball revived, it became Metis, and that's why she was born here in Purgatorio. She is a cast-off soul, and these two parts, body and soul, are still separate. They're not reunited. So if Aegis dies here, there is no soul, no fire to revive later. At the state Aegis is in now, if the body dies, she dies. And Metis knows this. It's one of the few things she did know once she was born here in Purgatorio. Aegis cannot die here, or she will die for good. And that is why she has her brain on permanent protector mode, especially here. Even when Aegis casts her away, refusing to call her sister anymore, Metis keeps on to that one objective to keep Aegis alive. Not for selfishness, but out of a sense to need to, which she and the audience later learn is self-preservation. Once the battles are over and the true key is formed, the crew prepare to use the door to the mall to see the past where Makoto fought Nyx. And this is where Mitsuru comes to the conclusion that if the door whose purpose is to prepare them all for battle is still here, does that mean that the fight's not over? Once the crew comes to the realization that they have not come to any realization, any answer, a new door appears. This door has no ties to any circles of heaven, hell, or earth. It's simply called the final door. As such, it seems like this door leads them out of Purgatorio and back on Earth, or at least the earthly realm, and we see what happened to Makoto. As I ran over in section 1, Makoto is keeping Erebus from getting to Nyx. Rather than holding Nyx back, the seal is made for Erebus. Also on a side note, I love that the crew get here and once they can move, Metis points out again that if they all experienced it, they can all move, to which Junpei says,
Wait, everyone? But you weren't here for this.
But you weren't here for this? As if no one put together that all this time Metis never left the Abyss and was never with them in the mall. No one seemed to put that 2 and 2 together until now. They don't even put it together now. Back on track though, this door actually fits the theme of the other doors. These doors are all reflections of regret that the characters have. A door will represent a person, so what does this final door represent? Final door. Everyone. Oh yes, it's one of these. The final door represents everyone, all of humanity. It represents Erebus, who reached out for Nyx, for the end. And while we're here, let's talk about Nyx, Erebus, and Thanatos, aka the Nyx Harbinger. Erebus in mythology is actually Nyx's brother. They are related, both siblings of the god Chaos. And Erebus is actually the god of old age. Kind of fitting for someone who's reaching out for the end, the god of someone's last chapter in life, reaching out for that final resting place. And Thanatos is actually the son of Nyx, which is interesting to think about that basically all this time Thanatos had come warning us, yo, my mom's about to come here and just destroy everyone, so fair warning, yeah? But back to this context, Erebus represents everyone's regret. It's not one big regret like the main cast has, it's just millions of these small regrets, culminating into this thing wishing for the end. Think of it like in Persona 5. People with real warped desires had their own palace. But then there's Mementos, which was everyone's palace. Here, the rooms are deep regrets, based purely on Makoto, and the reason for the Abyss. But then there's this Memento-style god creature, who's the culmination of all these smaller regrets. The answer was ahead of Persona 5 in so many ways, it really makes it a lot easier to explain. The crew seeing Erebus means a lot more than its defeat. As the game mentions after its defeat, it's not dead. Erebus will come back. However, knowing of his existence is the real tipping point of the crew. They all realize what they had inside them, this small yearning for death once life loses its meaning. They fight it physically here to quell it for a short while, but the real answer, the thing that they've been searching for this whole game, is how they will fight it inside themselves and in the hearts of everyone. To weaken it, they must change the hearts of people who yearn for Nyx's return. It's a Herculean task, one they must stay alive for. Aigis most of all learns now what her purpose is. It's not to join Makoto in death, it's to help him in life. And that is where Makoto and Aigis's answer to life deviates, and how the stories of the journey and the answer split. The journey is all about death, as that is Makoto's answer. The answer is all about life, as that's Aigis's answer. They are two halves now, Makoto trying to save people from his side, and Aigis from her side. It's a lot like the end of Kingdom Hearts 1, in a way. Sora and Riku both have these two Keyblades, one from the world of light and one from the world of dark. And while Riku stays to fight in the world of darkness, it's up to Sora to help him in our world, the world of light. The only way to truly put an end to the suffering is to wage this war on both fronts, life and death, light and dark, yin and yang. Before I wrap up this section and get to my theory on what this game represents as a whole, I want to talk about the ending song. For one thing, it's an absolute banger, and if you like nothing else about the answer, then I urge you to at least listen to this ending song, Brand New Days. But that song, much like the ending songs of other Persona games, does go over events of the game itself and its lyrics. The lyrics of Brand New Days seem to be sung from the perspective of Aigis. I think the lyrics here are also interesting to discuss, as they kind of go into Aigis's feelings in a much more personal, one-on-one telling in song form. Full disclosure, I could not find much of any English translation for this song. People seem much more interested in the ending song of the journey. The one I did find is done in pretty broken English, so some of this is embellishment on my part. For example, the lyric, "The yesterday in eyelid," I changed to "last night's dream," to get the meaning across more accurately into what "yesterday in eyelids" directly quoted would mean. Still though, this person did a much better job than Google Translate could, so I thank them very much. I have linked their video below. So ready? Here we go. So this line is basically Aigis talking about the sunlight waking her up out of that dream she had of Makoto leaving her, being all along, of her broken promise. This is when Aigis is at her low point, ignoring the world around her. So the first 4 bars were sung from the past, when she's having these dreams at the start of the game. But now we've jumped to the end of the game, once we've found the answer, and how the sun rays and this blue sky and this new day is something that was a gift from Makoto. Something she would not have without him, and she'd completely forgotten this fact in her grief. But now she's looking up towards it, looking forward to these new days. Together with her friends, she plans to keep her bonds forever. Especially now, going back to school with them, rooming with Yukari, etc. This part seems to be more directed at Makoto, wondering if they're both looking up at the same moon. If he's at peace with their goodbye as she is, if that pain still lingers. Her answer was to look forward, yes, but as Akihiko said, the past will make up what we are as well, and we shouldn't completely forget it. Makoto is still a fond memory for Aigis, forever, but it's not something holding her down in the past anymore, stopping her from moving forward. Here we get a reprise of the chorus musically, but lyrics-wise we get a completely different chorus. The first one was directed towards her friends, whereas this one is directed at Makoto. She also continues to reiterate that there will be blue skies and a tomorrow ahead for them, even if the course of time changes everything again. Aigis will continue to move on towards her goal, the goal she and Makoto both share, leading people into brand new days. Here we get an actual reprisal of lyrics with the same sun shining down metaphor, which is a way to bring us back to the pre-endgame Aigis from her first set of lyrics. However, this time she speaks from them in past tense. She has made it through, and now she reflects on herself back then, trying to recall the meaning of living, cowering, scared of the world around her, Makoto's smile, his presence being all she remembers and wanted, But now upon reflection, it is less a regret and more of a driving force, a memory of good times had with him. We close the loop on her reflection post-game. Here we get the final chorus, which sums up the feelings of walking towards tomorrow with her friends and memories in tow. There will be a tomorrow that she leads into these brand new days, away from the influence Erebus has had on people, slowly but surely, finally putting a stop to the end properly. And when they both work at this ending, they can finally meet again at the end. These lyrics basically just take an already amazing song and bring it to a whole new level. And again, I really recommend you listen to it. Everything is great. The composition, the singing, the lyrics, all of it. And it finally puts a bow on the game, as well as this chapter in the lives of the characters we have come to know and love. And that is what my thoughts are on sort of the back end of the game. What all these events happening really mean, and what's actually happening to these characters. So the final question becomes, why? Why did Aigis need this journey at all? Why were the group sent to face their regrets, and Aigis get her humanity back? Yes, it is the fact that this was just sprung up to begin with, but why they had to do this at all is where we get into my theory about all this, in Section 3. My theory, their journey.
At the tone, the time will be midnight.
Hey there! Thanks for making it all this way through the video. Welcome to the interlude. Hope you're enjoying the video so far. Is there anything that you think I missed in sections 1 and 2? I might get to some of those in section 3, but I'd still love to hear your thoughts. And I know that sounds like I'm just farming for comments, but honestly, I just really would like some Persona 3 The Answer discussion, because there's so little positive discussion about this game. I'd really just like to meet some like-minded people. So, the interlude here is because I had a couple of points that I really tried to work in to the script originally, but honestly, these 2 points were just not getting anywhere, and anything I sort of tried to piece together was kind of just ending up being a theory that I'm putting confirmation bias onto. I'm just like keeping it on like, why is this like this? And then I just look through and pick out like random sections. So there's 2 things. So the first thing was an error that I've sort of changed over the course of this video, and that was the idea of Makoto's shadow. So a little behind the scenes on making this video. At first I thought that the Makoto shadow, the one we see in Empyrean, and all over the boss battles, really was Makoto, like his actual shadow. I thought that that was him testing the crew on their way into and in Empyrean. But the more I sort of thought on that, the less sense it really made. Honestly, it just makes a lot more sense if Makoto's shadow is, well, his persona. The persona that we see Aigis have. Because, well, like Meta said, shadows, or personas rather, are just tame shadows. So that makes more sense to have it be his persona and not just some random shadowy figure. It also doesn't make sense that, you know, Makoto would be this guiding, like, power with Aigis, but then also be this, like, figure in the shadows doing this secondary guiding. It just doesn't work with both of them being a guide, per se. It makes more sense if Makoto's always there with Aigis in the form of his persona. Also, as far as guides go, Metis is just a better idea of a guide, and I'll get more into that into section 3. But as far as guides go, this Makoto shadow thing was just not working. So, what is the Makoto shadow that we see in the game? Well, it is just, as they say, it is the culmination, the monster that has taken form of their regrets And since this is Empyrean and it's Aigis / Metis' door, it's mainly their regrets. The second one I want to talk about is Fuka. I have not talked about her at all. No matter what I'm talking about, surface story, below the surface, anything in my theory, just nothing seems to work. She's just so... just there. She has no door, she picks no side in the conflict. Honestly, her biggest plot point in the game seems to be regurgitating Ikutsuki's notes. Now that Ikutsuki is dead, someone needs to have found his notes to explain what he found out about the Abyss of Time. So even there, Fuka is just a mouthpiece for Ikutsuki's character, not her own. I was originally going to have the theory that Fuka really is Aigis' partner, not Metis, because if Metis is Aigis, she's... my CD! If Metis is Aigis, she's just teaming up with herself, so Fuka would be her real partner. But the only evidence I had for that was that both Fuka and Aigis can't come to a conclusion, they can't come to an answer. But that's really the only similarity they have at all. Aigis, of course, does eventually come to a decision, and it's one that just Fuka, again, goes along with. She doesn't really come to her own mind, she just follows what Aigis is doing. And I promise there's more to this than just Aigis is main character, ergo Aigis is more important than Fuka in this scenario. I will go more into that in section 3, but as it stands, she just really doesn't leave any impact. She's not even a playable character, you can't even battle with her. It's just so weird to see how little of anything Fuka really contributes to the answer. Even Koromaru, the dog, has more development in the answer. We see that he was in Junpei's door, agreeing or at least understanding Junpei's desire to want to change the world, and even going along with Junpei as his partner in the fight, agreeing with Junpei's side. So Koro's got like actual character here. There's also the fact that Metis being able to talk to Koromaru is a big sort of plot hint about who Metis really is, because Aigis can't understand Koro even though she's supposed to, and now Metis can, because Aigis has stripped away that part of who she was, her ability to be like understanding of feelings and emotions. That's all gone into Metis. So now Metis can understand Koro, but she can't. It's a plot point that actually focuses on Koromaru. Fuka has nothing like that. So honestly, it just seems like a dog is more important than Fuka. If I'm wrong, if there is something that Fuka does in this, please leave a comment below. Seriously, give Fuka some justice, because I am strapped for ideas on that one. Anyway, let's get on to the final section of this video, my theory about the meaning behind all of Persona 3, The Answer. Stay tuned. Oh, just one more thing. This channel never does ads, Patreon, or sponsorships. I don't get paid for doing this. So if you do enjoy, please leave a like to help me know that, it was worth it and you did enjoy this video. You don't even have to subscribe if you don't really want to. Just let me know that you enjoyed this video. It means a lot to me. So, alright, thank you.
At the tone, the time will be midnight.
Aigis is Dante.
But hey, that's just a theory.
Shut up, Matt, let me explain. Aigis is not literally Dante. Rather, her journey is a near facsimile to his in many ways. Really, the whole group is along on this journey, as mentioned in section 2. However, I believe it's Aigis' journey through alone that is the real meaning behind this whole game. This whole game, The Answer, hinges on our new main character, Aigis. Aigis, like Dante, is going down the wrong path. This path of regret that causes her to slowly dehumanize is like Dante's walk down the path of sin away from God. At this time, Aigis, like Dante, is brought upon by a messenger, a guide, to show them why the path they are going down is wrong. So, who is the messenger, and who is the guide? Well, let's start with the more obvious one, the guide, Metis. Aigis needs to keep her humanity, and ironically here, it will be that very humanity that she cast away that will guide her into reclaiming it and stepping back on the right path. In Dante's Divine Comedy, whilst travelling hell and purgatory, Dante has a guide with him through it all, Virgil. Someone who has passed on and is now here in the afterlife, reborn here. Metis is the same. She is someone who is reborn into this afterlife place, knowing its ins and outs, so that she's able to help Aigis pass through it. Virgil is someone who is very brave in his guiding of Dante, sent by Beatrice on a mission sanctioned by God. He fights off demons, tortured souls, and anyone trying to get in the way and hurt Dante. The comparison here is very obvious. Metis has the same fighting style as Shinji, and while this is a good way for the devs to use the moveset of a character who was with us for all of a month, it's also very fitting. Metis is ready to protect Aigis at any cost. The demons they come across, the shadows trying to harm her, those lost souls, and even the lost souls that are her friends, stuck in this loop. Both at the start and when the fight breaks out, she is there for Aigis. No one touches her sister. So having Shinji's very powerful, attack-heavy, axe-like fighting style makes sense for someone who is there as a physical defender of Aigis. Metis can also be clearly seen as a guide because she literally acts as a guide in a very literal sense here. She takes them down to all these places, she knows the areas, and helps them traverse this place safely? Well, about as safe as hell swimming with monsters can be, I guess. Metis also seems to just have her one goal, to guide Aigis to safety. This is not about her, she doesn't care for her own life. She has been made to give Aigis this epiphany, and so that's all she's born to care about. That way, I'll be able to save you from this cursed fate. To be honest, that's all I really care about.
Even if the end result of this power is death.
I don't want you to die!
So, who is the messenger? The person who sent Aigis on this quest? Who is Beatrice? Well, interestingly, since the role of Dante has been flipped from male to female, so too has the gender of Beatrice. My theory is that the person who sent them all on this quest to overcome regret and to give Aigis her meaning to life was Makoto. Why? Well, let's look at all the clues the game gives us. Let's go back to the cutscene after Empyrean, Metis' awakening. I did say I'd come back to this one. As I left off, I had explained what was really happening in this scene. The birth of Metis from Aigis' depression and her broken promise. In this scene, Makoto walks away to the top left of the screen, and when Aigis makes her wish to never have these human attributes, a light shines from that direction, the one Makoto just exited from, and Metis is born. I believe in this last scene, Makoto is the one giving Metis life here, granting her wish, ironically to show her why the wish is a bad idea. Kind of like It's a Wonderful Life, where the character wishes they were never born, and then a spirit comes up and gives him a, "Oh yeah, do you still wish that now?" and shows him all the horrible ways life goes out for everyone who he loves and cares for. This scene shows the beginning of our protagonist's entrapment in the area, yes, but as to why, it was so Aigis could find her reason for living and continue on her humanity, a quest given by Makoto. So, why is everyone else along too? Well, 8 people do give a lot more protection than 1. However, as we covered in section 2, everyone here has regrets they need to overcome. This journey is for them as well, just on a lesser scale. Makoto is obviously going to help his friends in any way he can, even via just this one lesson, even after his death. No wonder the crew were confused after seeing this cutscene for themselves. They just witnessed a dream of a birth of this new character as a quest through this abyss that they are now stuck in. I think most of us would be stuck unpacking just layer 1 in their shoes as well. This scene gives us the answer for everything going on. It contains every answer we may want, but for them at this point, this is useless information. They don't know what to do with it, or how to even process it. But that's just one clue. Granted, it's the biggest one that the game gives, but there are other hints here and there earlier on after this event. Makoto has been here with Aigis from the start with his shadow Orpheus. However, he cannot directly guide Aigis through his aura himself, being dead and all. While we do have the guide in the form of Metis, Makoto is here in his shadow form to help Aigis along her way. I wanted to reiterate this and set the scene, because we're dipping our toes back into Empyrean again. Seriously, this is a section that has so many revelations to the story, it is insane, but on a first playthrough, you'd never digest almost any of it. In Dante's Divine Comedy, Virgil cannot come to Empyrean with Dante and Beatrice. He is stuck in purgatory until he has fulfilled what he needs to ascend. Now this is where we slightly differ, since Metis does continue with the crew to Empyrean, but the thing I want to highlight is the boss of Empyrean. When Dante gets to Empyrean for the first time, he is met with Beatrice, the person who sent him on this quest. But this is not the end of the quest for him, because upon meeting Beatrice there is still more for him to traverse. When Aigis gets to Empyrean, she is met with this imposter of Makoto. They've hit this heavenly realm, but something's wrong, something's corrupted here. And their journey is not over either. They still have more to learn. They may kill this imposter, but Makoto still lives on in Aigis' heart. There until she and the others get their truth to end their quest. And when I thought about this train of thought, I realized something. Why the discrepancy? Is this really just another shadow, or is this something more? The significance of Empyrean and Makoto was just too great for that to be it, and that's when the idea hit me. In Dante's Divine Comedy, when Dante and Virgil go to Purgatorio, Dante must be tested in order to get to heaven, aka Empyrean. The fact that this test is taking place before they can find their answer, before they can open the door past Empyrean, could be Makoto's test for them, or specifically Aigis to find her answer. The timing is a bit off in comparison, but Dante's journey for his answer ends at Empyrean, whereas Empyrean here gives him the answer that the regrets about the past is what holds him back. But this doesn't give Aigis her reason to live. She's still just as indecisive and confused. This test gives him the key to get that answer, much like Dante's test gives him his ticket to Paradiso. The idea that Aigis is Dante's facsimile also answers a question that I had for a very long time. I played Persona 3 The Answer for the first time around 5 years ago, and I was always left confused about one thing. What are Junpei and Koro fighting for? Why are they agreeing with Akihiko but still fighting him over it? I think I finally have a reason that makes sense. The group is split into 3 teams that you have to fight. Yukari and Mitsuru, who want to go back to the past, Akihiko and Ken, who want to move forward, and then there's Junpei and Koro, who also do, but still fight Akihiko and Ken. So why? Well, Dante's Inferno is the most well-known story, and the one that seems to have massive parallels to a lot of the stories, including this one. But I think the answer wants you to recognize Purgatorio and Paradiso as well. So to answer why this fight happens, let's step back a bit and focus our attentions on Makoto a bit more. At the ending scenes, we see Makoto holding back the evil that is Erebus. He performed a miracle in life, sealing away the darkness Nyx forever inside him, before dying and becoming the seal. Performing a miracle, in this regard, in Catholic and Christian thinking, would make Makoto a bona fide saint in this universe. So let that just sink in for a second, that in Persona 3, we are playing the final year of a made saint, before he saves humanity. That's insane to think about. Another clue to this is that the game gives us, in the ending credits to The Answer, all of our characters' pop-ups in silhouette form. We see their persona come up and fill up their silhouette. At the end of our crew we get our last character, Makoto. So what's his persona? Orpheus? No. Talos? No. Thanatos? Nope. It's Messiah. Messiah is the persona of Makoto. and we can clearly see in how the game describes Messiah that yes, this is a parallel they did intentionally. Messiah's compendium description states, appears before Judgment Day to save the virtuous. He's a universal figure, appearing in many myths around the world. Many stories involve his death and rebirth. Makoto appeared before Judgment Day, out of nowhere to this new town, and saved the virtuous, those fighting to stop the ruin. Messiah is an allegory for Jesus and the types of Messiah figures in different religious practices. Makoto is not literally the son of God here, but he is very clearly someone sent here by God or a godlike being to sacrifice himself, much like Jesus or Messiah, for everybody. This is why Makoto is given this persona. Hell, the only way to fuse Messiah is with Orpheus and Thanatos, these beings of life and death, the combination of Makoto and Nyx's own son. From this point on, we're going to work under this assumption, that his answer to life was to become the seal and to become a saint of humanity. So why did I put this part in between the fight the group has with each other? Well, if we see Makoto's sacrifice being what made him a saint, we can, in turn, use the idea that the game wants you to recognize Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso to understand why there are 3 battles happening here. Yukari and Mitsuru. These two can be seen as Inferno, trying to undo this and bring an end to humanity for their own selfish reasons. Yukari can definitely be seen as the ringleader for this, pushing the rest of the crew away from their own answer and using the group's regrets and insecurities to goad them into fighting. Akihiko and Ken are Paradiso, selflessly moving forward for the good of humanity and Makoto and God's wish. Akihiko can be seen as the most standing of this trait, wanting to respect Makoto's wish, wanting to move on with his life for himself and others, and this is something that Ken had been slowly pushed towards throughout all of Journey, making him prime also for this line of thinking. Then Junpei and Koro would represent Purgatorio, a state of unmoving, going along with whatever and nothing. They don't really care, they're apathetic to the situation, to the fight, not caring strongly enough, and so they are away from Paradiso. Junpei's fear encapsulates this best. His fear is getting the best of his decision making, taking the path of least resistance, not testing himself, which is what Purgatorio is all about. So what does this 4th group represent? The one who you play as? I guess represents Dante going through all these challenges and traversing all these stages. So why is it so important that I reiterate this? You're not 10, you already know that Aigis equals Dante from my talk like 3 minutes ago. It's because this ties in with the key, and also something interesting about when you die in this game. See, anytime you die in the game, you just get this normal cutscene about the game is over, same as you did in the journey. However, upon battling Seas, and only upon battling Seas, there are exclusive death cutscenes. The game wants to drive home the fact that the choice of which path to take is for Aigis, and Aigis alone. This journey is hers, so when she's defeated and her key taken, she doesn't just come back like the others, she's killed. It doesn't matter who wins outside of Aigis, because every other group is wrong. They're all going into a losing philosophy that will lead to a broken team and more regrets, which is the opposite of what we're going for here. Aigis was always the one who was to use the true key. The game cannot have the journey continue with one of the other characters winning the key, because it was never theirs to use, never their decision to make. This is Aigis' journey, and the crew comes along for the ride, and they look inside their own hearts and find their own answers. But that answer cannot come at the cost of Aigis getting to her answer. Predetermination gets thrown out the window. God's idea, hell even maybe Makoto's idea of how this should all play out, changed. So there is no reason for Aigis to go on. Alive or dead, she never finds her answer. So why give this crew this ultimatum at all? If this is a challenge Makoto, under the say-so of a god, has given to his friends, why not just throw them into the answer? Well, 2 reasons I think. Reason 1 is the more obvious, that the crew would just never learn anything. You can tell someone the truth all day long. Doesn't mean they'll listen. Just shouting, "Hey, drugs are bad, yeah?" at someone, well, that won't solve anything, except maybe getting some expletives, maybe a punch thrown your way. But when someone faces the consequences of the actions of that path they're going down, well, suddenly that's going to be a lot more of a wake-up call. In the same way that if Makoto just sent over some message like, "Oi, quit being sad," it probably would not have been nearly as effective as having the crew stare their regrets right in the face, stare them down and figure out for themselves why they want to move on with their lives. Not just do it, but why they should have a drive to do it. Reason 2 is from the perspective of the real-life religious aspects that Dante's work draws from, in which God's greatest gift to humanity is free will. The ability to freely think and act how they want, and use this gift to come back to God of their own accord, instead of being forced onto coming back with a leash. In this way, the crew always has free will, always has the ability to choose. It's ultimately up to them to face their regrets, head on, or continue to run like they have been. And this is especially the case with Aigis in particular. Aigis being conflicted, not sure what path to take, really annoys the group, especially Yukari. But this is because Metis has not grasped her answer yet. She's still on her path. She knows there's something that should be learned here, but she doesn't know what. She can't make her decision based on shaky ground. So it's only when it finally clicks for her does Aigis know what to pick. And this decision is rewarded with clarity as they enter the final door and see what became of Makoto with their own eyes. Something else that we see that seems a bit similar but is pretty wonky on the timeline compared to the original source is the idea of the 7 trials. So in Dante's Divine Comedy, once he hits Purgatorio, he has 7 letter P's placed upon his head. And as he makes his way through the 7 areas of Purgatorio, one of these letters gets removed as he conquers each layer. Once he has had all 7 removed, and he has conquered all 7 trials, can he move on to Empyrean? The answer gives us the Desert of Doors as our world hub, and lo and behold, that in the desert there are 7 doors, 7 layers, 7 trials to go through. And it's when Aigis and the crew finish these 7 trials that they get the key to move on to their real answer. The difference here is that Empyrean is the final trial rather than their destination. This change in my opinion alludes to how, again, Aigis' destination, her answer to life, is not death. Not just to climb up to heaven and then just be done. Her answer is life, to go back to the living with her human attributes and help. Empyrean is not her destination, it is not her answer. But learning that is another one of her trials, as throughout this entire game, in her mind, she's assuming that finding her answer means death, just like it did for Makoto. She asked this question right at the start to Igor, will finding the answer mean my death? And because Igor didn't answer, she then spends the whole time having to find that answer for herself. Which is, again, something that's interesting. Is Igor in on this as well? Because if Igor clearly said, "I don't know," or "no," then she isn't learning this on her own. Again, she's being told the answer. But if Igor didn't know, he would, I assume, say, "I don't know." So saying nothing makes me think that he is also in on it. He knows what Makoto's doing. He knows his role is there to help. Much like his role is there to help visitors of the Velvet Room. Makoto is still needing help means that Igor is still there, to help. But he also could be there for Aigis, could be there for both. That's another thing to think about. It's just an infinite rabbit hole we could go down here. The crew start in a very deep layer of hell, Melborg, which I assumed would mean that we'd be jumping all over the place. However, that isn't so. Once we pass here, we get to Cocytus, the river through hell. Like I said before, Dante and Virgil used a giant to get to the 9th circle, but since they don't have one handy, the crew need to take this metaphorical river instead. every other level here is going further and further through this deepest layer of hell, the 9th, all the way down to the deepest part of it, Judecca, where Satan himself, as well as Judas, reside. The team then conquer this final layer of hell and get straight to Paradiso, Empyrean. But then the team fall back down to Colossio, Purgatorio. The crew have made their way all through to Empyrean, seemingly fought their way through every challenge, even got a grasp of the answer that this was all for. They had made it. Until they began to bicker amongst themselves. Infighting, hatred, anger ran rampant and obscured the actual truth. This again goes back to their lack of grasping the true answer. As they break away from their guide and their leader, they become completely lost, not sure what to do or where to turn. Their answers for what to do with the key are 100% influenced by the past and nothing for their future or even the present moment that they're literally stuck in right now. And this also is the real reason that the door to Polonia Mall stuck around. True, it is because, as they said, they had more fighting to do, but rather there was still an answer to grasp. They hadn't learned what this journey was intended for them to truly learn, ergo, the door never fulfilled its true purpose to show them the answer once they had the clarity to do so. A lot of the time I was trying to analyze this as a one-to-one recreation, but what the answer is doing is not retelling this story one-to-one. Rather, characters are hitting key comparisons, but their motives are all different. If they all acted like they would in biblical or Dante stories, everyone would seem completely out of character. Even what they have done, we can already see that Yukari's character is bent to her absolute limits to fit in even vaguely here. It's these characters in these situations. A guide with no clue. A journey where they don't understand the goal the first time. A Judas paving the road to hell with good intentions. Speaking of that Judas comparison, let's talk about that. Yukari is quite possibly the second most important character in the answer, after Aigis herself. She's the character who has the most severe change between journey and answer. As I said in section 2, Yukari's circle is Judecca. Now, in section 2 I said that these circles represent the character's regrets, what they feel like they did, the voice in their head telling them that they fucked up. And while what I said for Yukari in section 2 is the truth, I think her being in Judecca is a lot more literal to Judas. In her mind, she betrayed the Messiah, a messenger and beacon from God. She couldn't save Makoto. She in her mind then betrayed him, betrayed then God. That's why her circle is the last. That's why she's so desperate to change things. If you saw this representation of hell and saw your actions against the one you love was sending you straight to the bottom, straight down to the pits of hell, you'd do anything to fix that as well, even if it meant betraying others. But Yukari was never in this predicament. She'd never actually betrayed Makoto or God, she just thinks she did. She thinks this is her only salvation, but in reality, all she had to do was face these regrets head on. Yukari wants to go back in time and save Makoto, but in doing so would unwittingly undo the miracle that saved humanity in the first place. She would be dooming all of mankind for her own selfish actions. Ironically, much like with Judas's betrayal, the act itself incidentally saves humanity. Judas sells out Jesus, who is arrested and crucified, but in this action washes humanity of their sins, in essence saving them. Yukari's selfish actions lead to the crew breaking up and fighting. The fight is 100% her idea. She brings up taking the keys by force. She's the one that seems to goad other crew members into fighting. She shows no remorse in Aigis dying. Even in Aigis' game over screen, Yukari simply says nothing as Aigis lays dead and just leaves. Yukari insults her friends who want to move on and goads them into fighting. This fight is 100% on her. And yet, without this fight, Aigis would never have come to the decision that she did. She had no idea what she wanted to do. Only after being pushed did she come up with the idea to see Makoto now, and realize what was happening on the other side. This in turn gives Aigis her answer, and with her and Makoto doing their part, saves humanity. Neither Judas or Yukari had this as their intended outcomes, but through their actions, ironically save everyone. Of course, Yukari gets a much happier ending than Judas, but like I said, her comparison is just that little voice in her head telling her these untruths. She doesn't have these heavy sins on her chest like Judas had. The last thing I want to talk about is a trope that some people can get very annoyed about, and hey, I'm right there with you. The trope of the character you're playing whispering something we cannot hear to someone else.
Fuka-san, there's something I want you to hear. Huh? You too, Metis.
Like, come on, we are the player. Why do we not know something that they know? Well, I have an idea as to why this is the case. Aigis is who we are playing as, yes, but remember this is being told in past tense. She's already gone through this event and now we're playing a retelling. So she is a character in her own story, much like the real world Dante was a character in his own story. They are writing or retelling stories about themselves, and in this meta way, the characters we're playing as can reveal pieces of information when they want to the viewer, whenever they want. So they can use whatever trope they want to, and Aigis decides to reveal this information to us later in the story. So with everything that I just mentioned in sections 2 and 3, this is what I think happens in a simple flow of events as opposed to just a spewing of consciousness. You ready? Here is the full story of Persona 3, The Answer. Makoto seals away Nyx at the end of the journey, finding his answer to life, and the crew is told as much. As the power he uses to seal Nyx away saps his energy, and he passes into a permanent sleep/death, Aigis becomes distraught that she could not keep her promise to keep him safe. As the break between the years goes on, the crew move around the dorm, mainly keeping to themselves, but still keeping on friendly terms. Yukari and Akihiko find any reason to keep themselves out of the dorm and busy. Mitsuru works on her post-high school plans, and Junpei, Fuka, and Ken all get ready for the next year of schooling ahead of them. We also know that at some point Ken seems to adopt Koromaru and keeps Koro with him, as we can see in Persona 4 Ultimax of all games. At this time, Aigis has her recurring dream of Makoto leaving her behind, before her last dream, where Makoto answers her wish and separates her emotions from herself, and creates the guide, Metis. This in turn begins the turning of the wheels of the trials that Aigis and the crew will go on. As the last day of their time in the dorm approaches, they have a meeting to turn in their evokers. Yukari decides not to join, and Akihiko is too busy at the gym. Both run from the meetings for opposite reasons. The rest of the crew have their final shared meal, and midnight strikes, starting the events of the game, trapping the crew in a time loop caused by the Abyss of Time. The crew is then led by their guide, Metis, through the circles of hell that represent each of their own individual regrets and how they reflect on themselves, forcing them to fight these feelings while also reminding them of the reason for fighting in the first place at the end of their individual door. However, all these levels serve a secondary purpose for Aigis as the leader. All these levels are trials for her, as well as being individual windows into the soul for the crew. At the end of Aigis' 7 trials, they beat their core regrets in the loss of Makoto, and are given their individual keys, which seems like the end of their ordeal. However, this is the start of their actual trial, learning from their regrets and truly moving on. The group do not succeed to start off, fighting each other instead of coming to a consensus to move on. Eventually, Aigis ushers the group to see for themselves the reason Makoto gave his life, where they see Erebus, the real reason for this mission they were sent here for. Upon beating him, Aigis learns her reason for living, to usher humanity into brand new days, away from wishing for death, wishing for Nyx. The crew all agree to help in this endeavour, moving on with their lives the proper way, remembering the past, but not letting it guide their every action. Aigis, upon her journey's end, realizes that she can still protect Makoto, giving her life new meaning. And as the crew move on forward as well, they become a much tighter knit unit. The bitterness and hatred are gone, and Yukari and Aigis even become dormmates. Makoto's plan worked, and the journey they went on was ultimately a success. The crew are no longer bound by their regrets. They can finally live their lives as they're meant to, as they deserve. As Makoto is able to save his friends one more time, Aigis speaks to Makoto for the final time, promising that she will lead people to these new days, before she heads out to live her own life as well, her humanity intact. The crew have finally found some semblance of peace. This is why I said in the start that I think the story in The Answer is truly beautiful. I truly do believe that the characters in Persona 3 grow more than any other Persona group. They go through this insanely dark year, fighting for their place in the world as everyone they love dies around them, friends, family, fellow SEES members. But they find resolve to carry on. Through the journey, they have these insanely strong character arcs, which are already amazing, which is great, but The Answer says let's really put them to the test. Let's push it to the breaking point. What are they really moving on for now? And that answer seems to be they now fight to run from the past, from their regrets and their scars. Through this game they learn to embrace all of it. They truly now come out of it with stronger resolves, tested in the harshest ways, and now they can safely come out the other side and help people through their experiences. They no longer live shackled by their fear and regrets, no longer shackled by the death of their leader. Rather, they follow his example and live on for him, for brand new days. And I think that's a lesson that The Answer teaches uniquely in this series. It's okay for the journey to give the idea to fight on through everything that life throws at you and to try and come out on top. It's an absolutely good message for anyone to not give up. But The Answer gives us the message of, it's okay if these trials hurt and scar you. You're not invincible, you don't have to act like you are. Through this pain, and through the help of the friends you have, you can grow on them. And that's how you truly get stronger, and move on, and you can, always, move on. Which I think is a beautiful message, told with an awesome cast of characters. I can't help but love Persona 3 as a full package, the journey and the answer. And I hope now maybe some of you at least see why, even if some of you still don't agree with it.
At the tone, the time will be midnight.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my analysis of what Persona 3 The Answer is all about, and my theory behind what it actually means. Aiga's coming to terms with her own answer through a journey orchestrated by Makoto, just to help his friends one last time. Honestly, it seems like such a Makoto move to do. Even after his death, he's still finding a way to help his friends through their journeys and through their futures and lives. While I am confident in, obviously, Section 1 and 2, my thoughts behind those, Section 3 is, like I said, just theory. It could be wrong. It could mean something completely different. I don't claim it to be 100% accurate and what it really means, but that's the great thing about theories. A game can mean so many different things to so many different people and can have meanings that we find just ourselves to connect with. And that connection can be different from person to person, and that is what makes games a great medium. Honestly, just, it is an art form. Even though we have some games that are a little more, modern art. But honestly, it is fun to just sort of delve into what I think about the game and everything. Hell, the scripting and research for this video took a month. of me going through everything, reading Dante's Divine Comedy bits and pieces, and playing through the game again, and watching the cutscenes at least 4 or 5 times, piecing things together. In the editing room, I must have, watched some of these cutscenes at least 20 more times. And a lot of these ideas would come to me, just as I was about to sleep. So I'd, roll over, grab my phone, and, just type something in, and then future me would have to decipher whatever the hell past me was talking about. So, thanks, past me. You dick. Nah, but honestly, it was so much fun scripting and making this video. I absolutely enjoyed the hell out of it. It was amazing to sort of watch the pieces sort of fall together in real time as I was writing this out. And honestly, like I say, other people are going to have different theories, and I would love to hear your theory about Persona 3 The Answer. I'd love to have a thread of theory comments, theory crafting about this game. Let's get more talk about Persona 3 The Answer that isn't just, this game is bad, I don't like it, combat is bad. Let's have a little more positivity towards this, because honestly, I think the story in this game, like I said, is beautiful, and people are sorely missing out on it. Persona 3 The Answer might be the most hated Persona game in the series, but honestly, I really enjoyed it. Every time I finish the journey, I will finish the answer as well, and honestly, it's the biggest reason as to why I'm a proponent of FES over portable. All respect in the world to people who prefer portable. Honestly, it's not a debate. You like which version you like. We're not here to fight over it. Both versions are available. Whichever one's your fancy, you can pick that one up. Hell, play both. You get something unique out of both of them. In my opinion, it's a win-win. And while the fights in The Answer really frustrate me to no end, and I understand that issue with the game, I want to know how this full journey really ended. I want to see the conclusion for our characters, the ones that we had played for hundreds of hours. If not hundreds, 100. I don't know, hundreds if you play it over and over again. And honestly, I feel like The Answer can be just as deep as the journey, if you look deep enough. Maybe I've changed some minds about The Answer. Probably not, and that's okay. Because for me, and people like me who enjoy it, we'll always have it. It'll always be here. Until the discs degrade. Then we'll cry and play it on emulator. Persona 3, the whole package, has a very special place in my heart. And you know who else does? You, the viewer. Yes, we're going that cheesy. Thank you so much for sticking through this whole massive fucking video with me. It has been a journey, and I hope you enjoyed The Answer. Thank you, hold your applause. I had a lot of fun making this video. I hope you guys liked watching it, maybe got something new out of it. If you did, please leave a like, because that's really the only thing I really care about on this channel. I don't make money off it, so lets me know the video was worth it. This video and all the theories I've put on it, probably the proudest of any video that I've been since I started making videos in 2005. I've had a lot of fun projects, but I really put a lot of work into this, months of work into this one, and I like to think I'm proud of it. The final thing I'd like to say is that I know the game can have a lot of glaring issues in its combat, but for me, gaming is also just as much about the story. If it wasn't, the Walking Dead games and anything Telltale, as well as other games like it, wouldn't exist. I think to be a truly great game, you need to have a great story as well as great actual combat and stuff. It really draws you in to want to continue going, and even if your combat or your gameplay is not the greatest, if you've got a really compelling story to go with it, then that just amplifies it. And if you do have amazing gameplay, then you've got something of absolute legend. And that's what I think this game is. It's just something so unique and so awesome. I really think everyone should experience it, whether you play it, whether you watch it. The movies are out there. If you don't want to play a full long-ass game, you can just watch the movies. Then it takes 100 hours down to 5. So you know, there's that option as well. There's always joy to be found in not just this game, but any video game. Any game that holds a special place in your heart. And honestly, I think games like this and other special games that hold a place in my heart really have shaped who I am and have helped me move on to brand new days. Honestly, I don't know if I'd be the same person if I didn't have games like these sort of shaping me as to who I am. Whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, that's up to you to decide. But, you know, I think it's a good thing. Anyway, take care. Remember you're loved, especially if your name is Kat. And I'll catch you all next time. I don't know why I'm sending vibes to you. I don't know. I've been recording this long enough to pack this up. I might play some Persona 3 dancing. I like this game too, by the way. I know people hate this one as well. I like everything you hate, apparently. Let's, precious Iger statue. This isn't even that, like, the base of this isn't even that thick. This is just a roll of tape. It's actually like that, and then I put the tape on to make it stand up tall. By the way, you guys like these headphones? I got these in Japan. They are actual recreation headphones. The foam has come off in the 4 or 5 years I've had them, but they actually work. They're actually real headphones. Like, they have a 3.5mm jack. Really awesome stuff. Now they're just props because I don't want the foam to come off any more than it already has. I'm rambling. Take care, guys.